require consideration of whether a collection against a taxpayer will impose an economic hardship. In a March 11 release, the IRS stated it will be flexible when considering collectability during these times. Could you be more specific? And you mentioned it, that you're telling your staff to be more flexible, to even suspend collection or work out agreements. Can you be more specific regarding any procedures the IRS plans to implement in light of the economic downturn?
Yeah. So a couple of things we did. When I mentioned postponing collection, we give thresholds, which aren't public, about how much tax is due, where the frontline employee who's talking to the taxpayer can actually take that collection case and put it back to the queue because of economic hardship. We actually raised those thresholds, meaning it can be a larger amount of tax, and our frontline employee has that flexibility. So that's one of the things we did. In the past, if you missed one payment, if you either had an offer in compromise or an installment agreement, it was an automatic default. We actually gave, again, flexibility to people that you could miss more than one if you show some economic hardship. We gave some flexibility that can be a discussion with people because, as you've all mentioned, at the end of the day, you've got to trust the judgment of your people out in the field. If you're going to tell them to use their judgment, you've got to trust them. And so we gave them more flexibility and less rigorous documentation requirements. With liens, we actually have now made it clear a lot of small businesses, the way they get a loan is they actually have the security be their house. And so we've actually made it that if somebody in this down real estate market is either trying to refinance their house or renegotiate or sell their house, that our lien won't stand in the way of that action. So people go through the time. So there's more, which I'd be happy to give you. What we've tried to do is do all this, but also we have to protect against a flood of people who can pay their taxes saying they can't pay their taxes. And so we're just trying to get this balance right. I think some have criticized and said I've leaned too far towards the taxpayer. I think in these times it called for extraordinary measures, and that's why we took some of them.
Okay. And how you mentioned that you're going to pay more attention to recoup some of the money in terms of international tax evasion, to do more audits of international tax evasion. Was
Yes.
that right?
Yes.
So do you have the manpower, the resources to go after this type of tax evasion?
Yeah, I mean, a couple issues. One is once you leave our border, and we don't have all the authorities that we have inside the border to follow the money trail, we have to coordinate with other governments. There's a lot of diplomacy that's needed, and it's easier to hide money. And so this is some of the toughest work that we do. When the continuing resolution, when we started continuing resolution at the end of last September, we essentially had a freeze on staffing. What I did was move some staffing from other areas so that we could keep staffing up in international. And you might have seen in President Obama's budget, he put a line item for robust international enforcement efforts from the IRS, and we anticipate getting significant increases in agents, both civil and criminal, for international lawyers, so that we can work through some of the complex issues,
you're saying
et cetera.
you're reprogramming the manpower that you have, so that you're going to use the staff for international compliance?
It's a priority. I've already done some shifts, and we're certainly, as we get more staff, going to lean towards international.
So my concern is how then will you have the people in your staff, the numbers that is required to be able to answer the questions coming out from small businesses who need to call the IRS, or for you to process some of the returns in an appropriate manner?
Yeah. So we have three appropriations. We have a support appropriation, we have an enforcement appropriation, and a service appropriation. This is in our enforcement appropriation that comes. We're not planning on taking people out of service roles. We really triage our enforcement people. And so it's a perennial issue. I mean, just an interesting statistic, we've had a 9% decline in staffing over the last 5 years, and a 10% increase in returns filed. So we've had a 23% increase in productivity. Technology and electronic filing helps. The web helps, but we're always having to manage resources. But a lot of people ask you when you become IRS commissioner, you're going to focus on enforcement, you're going to focus on service. I've been very clear. I'm going to focus on both, and I by no means am going to overemphasize enforcement at the expense of service.
Okay. So we know that so many businesses are experiencing a downturn, and many will be taking advantage of the expanded net operating loss provision in the recovery bill. What special steps has the IRS taken to ensure a timely processing of returns so many small businesses can get an infusion of capital?
Yeah. Right when this conversation started around increasing net operating losses, we brought together our teams who work on this. We assigned an executive to review the procedures and make sure there wasn't any clogs in the system. There's two ways to get these expedited returns. One is by filing an 1139 for the Schedule C filers, or for corporations, and one is for the 1045 for the Schedule C filers. We've actually staffed up, and so some of these areas, as we've been triaging, we've made sure there's enough staff there. I'm very confident that we're going to get these out quickly. We've made a commitment that all of them will get out within 45 days, but I've challenged the staff to get it sooner, and that's quicker than these usually get processed. And I'm going to be monitoring it daily, and if we see a surge beyond what we're expecting, we'll put more staff. I mean, we're going to make sure that we do this right. We recognize how important it is.
It is important since small businesses right now are having problems getting access to capital. You know, the credit crunch is incredible and it's impacting them. So this is a tool that will help get money back to small businesses. And I hope that our offices will not be inundated with phone calls telling us that they're not getting the rebates that was promised to them.
Yeah, no, I do too. I mean, one is I know a lot of this came through with your leadership. Clearly, the president is asked every agency to prioritize the stimulus or the Recovery Act and making sure we implement it well. The Treasury Secretary has asked me this as well, and this is something that I'm personally engaged in. And if your office gets any information that to the contrary, I please reach out because we're focused on this.
Thank you.